Thank you for joining us today for another edition of Conversations with AARP. I'm Troy deChabert-Schuster, your host and State Director for AARP in the Virgin Islands. Today we will talk about an issue that is vitally important both in this territory and across the nation, and that is ageism. Ageism is defined as discrimination based on a person's age and manifested through stereotypes and misconceptions that how older people and sometimes younger people are perceived and treated. It is often seen in the workplace through biased hiring and hiring practices and restrictive policies that hinder one's professional and personal development. Recognized as the most common form of discrimination worldwide, ageism, like any kind of discrimination, is wrong. It not only undermines the dignity of older adults, but it also seriously threatens their financial security by pushing them out of the workforce and denying jobs and promotions for them. That is why AARP is ardently committed to challenging ageism and advocating for systematic changes, ensuring the rights of older workers are protected and restored, and that they are fairly treated on the job based on their skills and experience, not their age. Here in the Virgin Islands, we have championed for legislation to remove the age limit for Virgin Islanders seeking to operate a vehicle for hire. You'll hear more about that later in the show. Established in 1967, the law restricts Virgin Islanders over 65 from obtaining the initial license to operate a vehicle for hire, or a taxi, in other words, when the life expectancy was only 70 years of age at that time. Today, with life expectancies averaging 79 and older, such restrictions no longer make sense. We are proud to say that our efforts have yielded support for legislation repealing such discriminatory practices. Bill number 35-0174 will be introduced in the chambers of the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands in early June. This local effort is part of AARP's national effort to ensure financial security and fair treatment for older workers. Joining us today on our show is Jessica Eckman from the AARP National Office, specifically Government Affairs, as a director responsible for AARP's advocacy work on financial security. Jessica will share insights into how ageism affects the financial futures of older adults and the measures being taken to advocate for their rights. Together, we will discuss how AARP is addressing these challenges both here in the Virgin Islands and across the nation. You will also learn about the impact of our recent efforts and the ongoing need to ensure all workers are treated fairly based on their qualifications, not their age. And so we welcome Jessica Eckman. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be talking with you today about this.
Yeah, thank you for joining us from our national office. We always like to have our national colleagues on because it shows the real connection between AARP in the Virgin Islands and AARP nationally. I think that sometimes people view AARP in the Virgin Islands as maybe a franchise or an affiliate of AARP, but no, we are AARP. And we are employees of AARP here in the Virgin Islands, just as you are, and we work together for the good of the 50-plus population across the nation. And so, Jessica, tell me about your specific role within AARP. What is your title and what do you do?
Sure. So I am a Government Affairs Director with the AARP National Office's Financial Security team. And in this role, I'm fortunate to be able to serve as an issue expert on a range of issues with our 53 state offices. So I always say that I have the easy job. I just support all the hard work that you all do in the states. So we cover a range of issues, one of which is age discrimination. And it's a really significant issue, but maybe it's not talked about quite as much as it should be. So I'm excited to take some time today really talking through this with you.
Yeah, thank you. And it is so important, and it happens everywhere. Um, Actually, here in the Virgin Islands, we have seen the government doing something really wonderful, and that is bringing some of their older retired workers back to work. Uh, they had retired and were receiving the government pension, and the government pension had restrictions on their reemployment. But the governor of the Virgin Islands saw that his administration needed the expertise, the knowledge of some of these older workers. And so he worked with the retirement pension plan and got those penalties dropped and brought back a lot of older workers. And so it's really benefiting the government. Are we seeing similar kinds of things nationally where maybe companies, organizations, governments are bringing people back to work, older people, or hiring older people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the efforts here in the Virgin Islands are really important to combating age discrimination. We really need to remove those employment barriers and allow older workers to be part of solving our workforce shortages that we're seeing everywhere. This sort of multi-generational workforce it's more productive, it's more innovative, and we're seeing that in a lot of states, right, working to combat this. So continuing this line of work here and around the country is key to addressing this issue of age discrimination. In other states, we've seen efforts around eliminating age-based inquiries, including proxies for age, things like graduation date, et cetera, from job application processes, data gathering. So we have more comprehensive information about how state workforce centers are serving older populations, increasing or eliminating mandatory retirement ages, and equalizing coverage of age bias claims under small employers that might not be impacted by federal law. And I'm sure that there's a lot more that I'm not immediately calling to mind, but we have seen quite a bit of activity in the states on this over the past several years.
And it's so wonderful that AARP is really leading by example. I remember when I started working for AARP about 8 years ago, I asked my manager if there was a particular age at which I would have to retire. And she said, no. She said, as long as you can continue performing well on the job, you can continue working. And at that time, we had one employee working on the AARP magazine who was 93 years old and still doing great work. I don't know if she's retired since. I haven't kept up with that individual, but she was 93 years old and working on the publication of the AARP magazine, which is the most widely read publication in the country, right? So that's wonderful, really impressive. And so I mentioned in the beginning of the show about this bill that we have moving through the legislature now regarding anti-ageism, in particular with regard to taxis. And that's bill number 35-0174. And so it was interesting how this idea came to me. I was having lunch in a restaurant downtown one day, and this gentleman who is in his late 60s, but very able-bodied, very, very physically fit. He rides his bicycle all over the island, racing on his one of these fancy road bikes, right? I mean, he's not riding for leisure; he's racing around the island on his road bike. Um, and he explained to me that he was able to buy a taxi medallion. So here in the Virgin Islands, the Taxi Association controls these taxi medallions, and there've only been a certain number of taxi medallions issued, and that's it. They're not issuing any new medallions like for the last 30 years or something. They haven't issued any new ones. So if you're able to acquire a taxi medallion, it's like you've acquired gold or diamonds, And so he was so happy that he was able to buy one of these taxi medallions from somebody, I guess, who had either retired or maybe the driver had passed on and his family sold it. Not sure how he was able to acquire it. And when he went to get a license from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to actually operate a taxi, he was told no, because they're not issuing any new taxi driver licenses to anybody over the age of 65, whether you
Mhm.
have a medallion or not. However, if you have the license, or if you acquire the license before the age of 65, you could continue driving a taxi into your 70s or even into your 80s, right? But no new applicant over the age of 65 could get a license. So here he was in this quandary, had already, spent money to get the medallion, but then couldn't get the license to drive the taxi. And so right away I thought, wow, this is something we need to work on. This is ageism at work, and we are anti-ageism, and we need to change this. So we approached one of our local senators, and he was happy to sponsor this bill. And now it's moving through. We hope to have it heard by the legislature this month. So hopefully by next month, the law can be changed. And then anybody over the age of 65, but they'll have to go through a medical exam, which is good. A medical exam is important. We want to make sure that they're healthy, that they can see well, that they can hear well, that they can operate a taxi safely and transport people safely. So, there will be that part in the bill. There isn't, pardon me, I should say that is in the bill, that they'll have to go through a medical exam. But at least they will have the opportunity, even beyond the age of 65, to get a license to operate a taxi. And for us here in the VI, that's so important because we don't have Uber, right? Up in the States, you have Uber and Lyft, and we don't have those services here. So
You
it's
need
all
some way to get around.
right. You need some way, and our public transportation, our bus lines are very limited. They don't cover the entire island and every part of the island. So taxis are the way people do it if they don't have a car. So we're really excited about that.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something important. It's a small piece of the population, right? But it speaks to a larger issue. People see this everywhere, right? It's something that we haven't seen maybe as much work in other states as we have in some of our other issue areas. But I hope it continues to gain momentum for things just like this, right? Because we see time and time again these sort of negative stereotypes, these outdated assumptions about older individuals and older workers in particular that are really damaging, not only to those individuals themselves, but to the workforce at large. We need older individuals in the workforce for their good, for our good, for everybody's good. So I think it's fantastic that you guys are working on this.
Yeah, great. We're really excited about it, and we've never done anti-ageism legislation here, so this is a new area for us at AARP in the Virgin Islands. But now that we're focused on this, we're going to keep looking to see other areas where we can fight against ageism, and make sure that older workers have the opportunity, and because these days we live longer and healthier and stronger, right? When I go to the gym, I have some role models in there, some guys who are in their 70s, and they can lift way more weight than I can lift, and I'm just 53, right? Much stronger than I. And
It's how you live. It's not how old you are.
exactly. So they're my inspiration, the older guys at the gym, to get me in there working out and strengthen myself so I can live like them when I grow up, right? Yeah. So, and so tell us about other work that you're doing at AARP. We talked about financial resiliency, including retirement savings and paid leave. So tell us about those areas.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So two really important AARP policy priorities at the state level that I'm lucky to work on are retirement savings and paid leave. They're both critical to financial security. Um, far too many people don't have access to paid leave at work. They shouldn't have to choose between taking care of themselves or taking care of a loved one or losing their paycheck or even their job, right? So people often think about paid leave in the context of parental leave. And as a mom to two young children, I can attest to the importance of that for sure. But caregiving to older adults is incredibly important. And, AARP often talks about how you'll either be a caregiver or you'll need a caregiver. So paid leave is very critical to that. Another issue that is near and dear to my heart, and that AARP is a real leader on, is that of retirement security. So roughly half of private sector workers in the country don't have access to a way to save for retirement out of their regular paycheck at work. But we know that that payroll deduction is the magic, right? It's crucial to actually putting that money away. So AARP has been pushing for state-facilitated retirement savings programs. We often call them Work and Save. Sometimes they're called Secure Choice. There are a number of different names. But they help workers save their own money for retirement in an easy, low-cost way so that they can build that financial security for later years and really take control of their future. It's something that we have really seen take off in a number of states. There are 19 states now that have enacted program legislation of some kind. And not all of those are up and running. It takes a little while to get implemented. But with those that are up and running, we're closing in on the $1.5 billion mark for dollars saved. These are folks that generally wouldn't have had a way to save for retirement out of their paychecks. So it makes a huge difference. I think we all know that just putting a little bit away early on doesn't really matter. Earlier is always better. But, I get asked the question, if you're representing the 50 plus, why do you care about retirement savings? I don't know a lot of people who can retire at 50. There are a lot of folks working later and later. That's why age discrimination is such a big issue, right? So being able to put away a little bit of money just as long as you can, as early as you can, but as long as you can, makes a really big difference to delaying Social Security, making sure you have some cushion in retirement and can really maintain your standard of living.
Yeah, so important. And it's amazing. So you said that we hit the $1.5 billion mark. So in other words, as a result of these programs that AARP has advocated for, retirement savings programs, in total, we've seen $1.5 billion
Yeah,
saved
so
up already.
yeah, these are assets under management in these programs, and they're not allowed to have employer contributions. So these are just employee dollars, and it's 1.4-ish, little over 1.4 billion. So we're closing in on that $1.5 billion mark. But a lot of these folks wouldn't have been able to save before. You can always go out and open your own savings account, but we know that that very frequently doesn't happen. It's very rare for folks to do that. Most people save for retirement through their workplace. So that's something we're really proud of, and we're hoping that more and more states are working on this. We know the Virgin Islands is working on this, so I'm excited to continue that work here as well.
Yeah, we are working on that. And again, that legislation is moving through. Hopefully by next month, it'll be enacted here. And for our listening and viewing audience, if you are a government employee or have retired from the government, you have your pension from the government. Government Employee Retirement System, GERS, as we call it here in the Virgin Islands. But if you are working in the private sector, there's a very high probability that you do not have a mechanism for savings. There's probably no 401k, there's probably no pension plan, et cetera, established by the business that you're working for. So this program will allow you, as Jessica said, to save your own money, right, through a low-cost means, and it'll be managed by an investment brokerage company of some sort, where you can see a higher interest rate rather than just in your savings account. A lot of people here in the Virgin Islands still use simple savings accounts, which are good for a rainy day, but it's important to use an instrument that can yield a higher interest rate than a savings account, which in many cases is less than 1%. And
Yeah.
a lot of older people here love to use CDs, right, certificates of deposit, which have a very low interest rate.
Yeah, and these, the money is typically invested in a target date fund. So the investments are a little bit riskier when you're younger. And as you get closer to retirement age, they get more and more conservative so that money can really be counted on. So it allows for more growth, sort of in the early days and maybe perhaps a little bit less later on. But that's designed to be something, it's set up a lot like a 401k, right? A lot of these IRAs and 401ks have these target date funds that allow for this more aggressive growth.
Yes, yes. And so we're very excited about this. We've been meeting with the local chambers of commerce, and they're all excited about it, very much on board. The sponsoring senator is pushing it through, and we've been lobbying the other senators here in the Virgin Islands as well as the governor, and I'm sure it will become law very soon, and people will be able to save in a more effective way, in a more aggressive way, if you will, and gain a higher interest rate and have more financial security when they retire. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, and it ties back to this age discrimination issue, right? Because people are staying in the workforce longer, whether by choice or by necessity. And if they're not permitted to stay in the workforce for one reason or another, that has a huge impact on their retirement savings. So this is something, it's a multi-pronged approach to try to really improve folks' retirement security, financial security overall.
And, on a slightly different note, but still tying into financial security, here in the Virgin Islands, we've been advocating a lot for probate reform. We've been working a lot with the Uniform Law Commission of the United States and passing non-probate acts to help people to keep their property out of probate. Up until now, it's categorized under caregiving within the AARP universe, but it also goes to financial resiliency, right? Because real property is real wealth. And if we're helping people to keep their property and keep property in families as it goes on from one generation to the next, we're helping to build the wealth of future generations and even those generations as they age. And we're really, really excited about that. And so for our audience, if you want more information on all of this great work that we've done with regard to probate reform, please do visit our website at aarp.org/VI. We have a lot of information there and really important things that you can tap into really easily to make sure that your property stays within your family as you're planning your estate, as you're planning for the next chapter of your existence, if you will. So please do check out that information on our website, aarp.org/VI. And so, Jessica, what else is AARP doing to make sure that we can help people to maintain financial security into their later years?
Yeah, our financial security priorities span a number of issues, not the least of which is age discrimination. But there's retirement savings, which we've talked about, paid family and medical leave, paid sick leave, but also things like state and local taxes, fraud and consumer protection issues. And of course, I think what AARP is probably best known for is the national priority of Social Security and protecting Social Security. So it's interesting, the point that you made earlier about there's so much crossover between health and wealth, right? We're split into sort of financial security and livable communities and health and caregiving and family. And you have to use that to sort of divvy up portfolio issues, things like that. But there's an incredible amount of crossover. I speak with colleagues on the health and caregiving team regularly. I know that there are other colleagues of mine who cross teams regularly to ensure that they're really approaching things the right way and bringing in all the best thinking on an issue, because there is no siloed issue. Every issue touches another one, right? If your health is not in great shape, your financial security might not be in great shape, and vice versa. So it's a whole person approach.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one of the many things I love about AARP. We look at it holistically as we talk about health, wealth, and self, and looking at everything and truly empowering people to choose how they age as they live. And so another thing that we're working on here that touches on financial security is anti-elder abuse.
Mm.
right? We have a huge bill going through right now. That's another big piece of legislation. We have a lot on the table right now here at AARP in the Virgin Islands. And there are some laws in our books to protect the older people against financial abuse, but we're looking at a really, really, really comprehensive piece of legislation, looking at financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, everything, and increasing the penalties as well for financial abuse. So, we see such an uptick in elder financial abuse, especially as a result of the pandemic. And people are losing their money, losing all of their savings. So people are taking it from them in terrible ways. And so we want to protect that. And so we're looking forward to that happening here in the Virgin Islands too, with these more stringent rules and regulations and penalties for those who engage in that act.
Mm.
And so, Jessica, we're coming to the end of our show. How can people find more information at AARP's national Facebook page regarding all of these things we've discussed, such as ageism, retirement savings, pay leave, etc.?
Yeah, if you go to aarp.org/PRI, there are a number of different topics, a lot of research. We've done a ton of studies on all sorts of different issues. Several in there are related to age discrimination, multi-generational workforce, things of that nature. So I would encourage everyone to sort of check that out and scroll through the topics. We have a wealth of information. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming how much we have to offer in terms of resources, but dig through it. There is so much good information there. And everyone at AARP is always happy to help answer any questions as well.
Yes, and I also encourage our audience to stay tuned to our anti-fraud information, because that's another big issue. Here in the Virgin Islands and all across the United States, we see more and more scams, more and more fraudulent things coming out, email messages, text messages, all kinds of ways that people are trying to get your money. And for the older people, like I told my mother when she was still with me, if anybody calls you and asks you for your credit card number or your social security card number or any other kind of information, your bank information, hang up or tell them that your son, your daughter, your grandchild will call them back and ask them for their number. And I bet you they will not give a number and they do not want to call back. But that's one of the easy ways to get them off the phone. If they're really legitimate, they will give you their name, they'll give you their phone number, they'll be happy to get a call back from your son or your daughter. But if they're fraudulent, I'm sure they will hang up quickly. So that's an easy way to detect, right? Very, very easy way, very practical way. So again, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to be able to maintain their finances, to be secure as they age, and to live a happy life. And so, Jessica, thank you for being with us on this show. Thank you for sharing all the great work that you're doing at AARP nationally and allowing us to share with you the work that we're doing here in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, have a great day.